distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to welcome you today at the session Clean Energy Fueling a Renewable Future at the Moroccan Pavilion. Welcome. To begin, I would like to put this topic in the context of 2009. At that time, Morocco was facing a Manichaean choice between renewable energy and fossil fuels. So if we remember well, at that time the cost of fossil fuels, even if it reached a price of $148 per barrel, a world record, it remained more competitive than renewable energy. So we needed some daring, we needed some vision, and we needed some courage to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And it was exactly that showed His Majesty the King, Mohammed VI, God bless him, by engaging Morocco, all the private and the public stakeholders, towards a new strategy which is to develop in a massive way renewable energy with an objective of 42% by 2020. And for him, this objective weren't only to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy, it was also a new strategy to explore a new level of industrial, economical, and social development for our country. So thanks to the success that has been shown during this decade, notably with the creation of Mazen, but also AMI, which is here with us today. So thanks to all these institutions, we've been able to raise up the share of renewable energy in the installed capacity from 28% to almost 42%. And in order to show and to confirm this strategy, His Majesty the King Mohammed VI gave us a new objective, which is 52% by 2030. And this figure is, if we stop one moment on these figures, moving from 42% to 52% means simply to double the installed capacity of renewable energy, which is a new, great, and important ambition. So all that has been done during the last decade with the strong ties and the strong link between all the public institutions and the private sector. And to do a retrospective and also to look at the perspective for the last decade, we will have today a distinguished panel composed by Mr. Tariq Haman, who is the Development Director of Mazen, Mr. Sahid Mulin from AMI, Mr. Kamal Htout from ONI, and Mr. Panmanhattan from Aqua. I will come back to them to present you more deeply later. So just to say that today Morocco have reached over 4,000 gigawatts of installed capacity from renewable energy. It's composed mainly from 750 megawatts from solar, over 1,770 megawatts from hydro, and 1,400 megawatts from wind. And in order to maintain this dynamic, Morocco is now targeting, as I said, 42%, based on more than 2,500 megawatts coming from solar, 1,300 megawatts coming from wind, and over 350 megawatts coming from hydro, which will put an objective of more than 6,000 gigawatts by 2030. Morocco, for the next decade, won't limit itself at the production of electricity from renewable energy, but we will explore new opportunities. Morocco has been ranked one of the 3 countries that will be the leaders of the hydrogen production, green hydrogen production, with a captation between 4 to 8% of the world and the global Power-to-X markets. A roadmap has been already elaborated, and the Commission has been created around hydrogen in order to finalize this roadmap and to monitor its implementation. I think that the speakers will present that more in detail. And because we have succeeded in achieving our national goals from 2016, we have been looking beyond Morocco, and Morocco has been taking its responsibility in order to lead a regional and a continental dynamic around renewable energy. Mazen has developed more than 20 bilateral cooperations with mainly African countries. And this cooperation took several forms. Mainly know-how exchange, capacity reinforcement, but more concrete example, like technical assistance. And we can mention here Rwanda, where Mazen accompanied the national utility to secure the design and to negotiate commercially its biggest hydropower plant, which is near Barongo. Also, Mazen involved in some African countries in terms of co-development. And for example, Mazen is developing a huge program of 450 megawatts with the local utility of Zambia, which is ZESCO, to accelerate the access to energy in this country and to optimize the price of the kilowatt hour. And the first project, which is Safal, a solar project, is at an advanced stage of development. At the multilateral level, Mazen is also developing many initiatives with ISDB, for example, to accelerate the development of renewable energy in ISDB members. With IFDB, we are also leading an initiative which is called Desert to Power. And the objective here is to bring 10 gigawatts of solar energy to the 11 Sahel countries. Mazen is chairing the steering committee of this initiative and is considered as the technical arm of this initiative. Last but not least, Morocco and Ethiopia has launched in 2019 a coalition, which is the Coalition for Sustainable Energy Access. And it's the first time in the history of UN that two southern countries are partnering to design and to launch a southern coalition made by southern countries for southern countries. And we will have the chance to come back more in details on this coalition. Because we believe that we need to initiate a global dynamic in order to support this willingness to an industrial and economical dynamic here in Morocco. We are also initiating some actions with other countries, regional countries, in order to raise up the level of renewable energy. And this is why in 2016, a disruptive initiative was launched with 4 European countries. This initiative is called the SET Roadmap. And this initiative aims to integrate the renewable energy markets between the 5 countries and to liberalize the trade of green electrons between these 5 countries. After the signing of a common declaration at Brussels in 2018, many negotiations and studies have been led, and now we are happy to say that in the very next weeks, the binding agreements between the 5 countries will be signed, giving a clear acceleration and giving the legal framework to trade renewable electricity from renewable electricity under the framework of Green Cross-Border Corporate PPA. So that being said, let me now go to the distinguished panelists. We have 4 panelists here, and I will begin by presenting Mr. Tariq Haman, who is the Development Director of Mazen. He's in charge of developing Mazen's projects and activities in Morocco and abroad. He has more than 16 years of managerial experience in leading the development of large-scale infrastructure and power generation projects, including IPPs, PPPs, and EPC projects for different technologies. Before joining Mazen, Tariq Haman was the executive director of the power generation projects and programs at ONI. Good morning, Mr. Haman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zarwali. It's my pleasure today to be with you to share our experience and what we had done in Morocco and in Mazen specifically. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me present also Mr. Sahid Mulin, who is the General Manager of AMI, the Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency. You've been appointed by His Majesty the King Mohammed VI as Director General of the CDER in 2009, and you will tell us the story of the CDER, which in 2010 became the National Agency for the Development of Renewable Energies and Energy Efficiency, ADERE, and since 2016, a new life, it became the agency, the Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency, AMI. Previously, you was also president of the Mediterranean Association of National Energy, MEDENER. You've been also the president of the Energy, Climate, and Green Economy at the CGM. And within the organization of COP22, you are also responsible for the public-private partnerships. So thank you for being here. It's an honor to have you today, Mr. Mulin.
Thank you.
We have also Mr. Htout. Monsieur Htout est en charge de la direction stratégie et planification de l'ONU,
a department that anticipates the medium and long-term development of the electrical system, network, and production. You are also in charge of the engineering and production projects department of the office, which is the main actor of electricity in Morocco. Thank you for this invitation. I'm pleased to be with you today to discuss or to have all these discussions. It's a pleasure.
Last but not least, we do not have to present him anymore. Mr. Padman Nathan is seasoned engineering and energy expert with over than 40 years of experience. When we see you, Paddy, we don't think that you have 40 years of experience. He's a key member of Aqua Power's executive leadership team, having spearheaded its expansion from a startup in 2004 to where it is today, a leading private developer, owner, and operator of power generation and desalinated water production plant. You have accompanied also Aqua to go to public yesterday, so congratulations for this. The headquarters of Aqua is in Saudi Arabia, and the company now has a portfolio of over 62 assets with an investment value of 62 billion USD, producing almost 40 gigawatts of power and 6 million meter cube per day of desalinated water. Welcome, and thank you for being here, Mr. Paddy.
Well, thank you very much. I'm truly honored to be part of this panel, and I'm very sorry that I'm not physically there with you, but at least I'm able to participate virtually. And again, I'm truly delighted.
It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for being here. Mr. Saeed Mullin, you are the one who has the longest experience in the Moroccan energy field. So, Mr. Mullin, you are also one of the most important Moroccan personalities in the field of energy transition. AMI is the result of many evolutions from ADERE and CDER. I just mentioned that. Now, AMI plays a very important role around three pillars. The first one is industry decarbonation. The second one is energy efficiency. And the last one is sustainable energy. Could you please share with us AME's main achievements that contributed to create this exciting dynamic and a positive energy in the Moroccan energy transition, and give us also the history that began, I think, in 1982?
Exactly. Thank you, Ali, for this invitation. I'm glad also to be here today, especially in this marvelous pavilion. And I would like to say that, yes, in 1982, the Kingdom of Morocco created the Renewable Energy Development Center, the CDER. At this time, renewables were very expensive, of course, but some application in the rural areas, in the telecommunication were used. So we start looking at the technologies. And of course, it was in 1982, after the second oil shock. But in 2009, as you mentioned, Ali, we had this event on the energy, where the King's letter was very clear. Priority to renewable energy and energy efficiency in our energy policy. Objective to reach, you mentioned, for renewable energy, for energy efficiency. Dedicated agencies, Mazen, AME, other actors in the R&D, other actors in Irezen in the R&D, with industries also. We had this approach for developing industries in this field. So it was a strategy included in our Sustainable Development National Strategy. Energy is one of the sectors, but it is very important to look at. We were not developing projects, we were developing a strategy for all sectors. I will focus on what AME, when adhéré at this time, then AME in 2016. Why? Because with the big project that you mentioned on solar, on wind, on hydro, developed by ONI and Mazen, it was the history. But it is for big projects. But at the same time, when you're talking about the energy transition, you should look at all the applications and all the regulation and all the investment that you should look how to have this energy transition in all sectors. In the electricity sector, it's one thing. In the mobility, in the buildings. So we look at in this exposition how many pavilions are using new technologies for energy. We can have positive buildings, positive energy buildings. We can have sustainable mobility, as you can see. But all the sectors should be transformed. That's why when talking about the energy transition, it's much more than only renewables for big power. But that's why AME is working in the building sector, in the industry sector, in the transport sector, in the agriculture sector, with cities for public lighting. All those sectors can be transformed for more efficient and using more renewables in the applications. One example, what happened in the agriculture, for example, what we did to help farmers to switch from diesel pump to solar pumps. Today, it's more than 500 megawatt of solar today used in Morocco for solar pumping. It's almost the equivalent of what's going on in Warzazat. How we did this? We had to train young people to install, maintain, and implement solar pumps in the rural areas. Then you have capacity building, very important. You need to sensibilize farmers about the technology, why they should invest, because they're going to invest. And they invested in those solar pumps. We had to convince the local banks. Crédit Agricole du Maroc has a dedicated loan for solar pumping today. It helps a lot to do the investment for farmers. You need also to look at how we can have norms for those pumps. That's why with the cluster solaire, with the CGM, we have dedicated training for norms and for installators that has to be well trained for that. So when you have all that, you can reach and you can change the market. And now we are reaching more than 40,000 solar pumps installed in the country. And we are pushing for more. And we are also looking at how we can develop more and more solar pumping in the country. That's how we can have a policy in this field of energy efficiency. It's very important to look at all those points at the same time: sensibilization, financial support, capacity building, and of course, also this approach about norms and regulation. At the same time, for buildings, we have now norms for buildings in a way that energy efficiency is taken into account. It's very important. We have norms for buildings in different regions of the country, and that's how now we have developed those buildings more energy efficient in the country. It's also, regulation is very key. Technical and financial support, sensibilization and training, it's a key for energy efficiency. For architects, for all the actors who are buildings in the building sector, you need to have a lot of training, then you can reach those objectives that you want to reach. In the transport sector, we were more also having training for eco-conduit, for drivers, that they can decrease their energy consumption, but also for new technologies like hybrid and electric cars, we are pushing to have incentives from the government, taxation and things like that. So that's how now the market is growing a little bit. For the industry, it's the key today. You know, everyone is talking about decarbonization, and Europe is preparing a carbon tax on the boundary, and we are pushing now all the sectors, and those days we were discussing with the aeronautics industry, with the automotive industry that is well developed in the country, because they want to decarbonize, because they want to still export. Morocco is a big exporter of automotive today, of automobiles today, and it's very important to look at how we can be more competitive, and now we have the chance, because of this vision for renewable, that industry in the country can be decarbonized, not only by using renewables, because it's one, but also with energy efficiency, with the circular economy. That's how we developed projects also for helping industries to have all those points. Energy efficiency, use of renewable, and some legislation has to move, and we are pushing now, but legislation has to move that industry can have access to the green electricity, because green electricity is not only not an emitter of greenhouse gas, but also is cheaper today. In the context of Morocco, we are going to help the industry to be more competitive by being green. So it's something that is really on the way, and all the sectors, and we were discussing yesterday with also the textile industry, all the big exporters of Morocco, and 65% of our export is going to Europe, and with this carbon tax, we are preparing ourselves that in the near future, we'll have dedicated industrial zone, completely green, completely decarbonized, to help investors and to attract investors in this field. So you look, you see all those points, big project, it's an energy transition for the economy transition. So it's, that's why the challenge is quite high, but we are glad that with this King vision, with the sustainable development strategy, we are reaching our objective, and it's also knowing what's going on in the world, knowing what climate change is showing us every year, and especially this year, or what we saw in the world. We are glad that our approach as a very oil-dependent country, we were a very big importer, we are changing this mind. You mentioned hydrogen is the next step. We're sure that projects to not only develop green hydrogen in the country, but also exporting green electricity from the country. I think some projects also are in the program today. So we are very glad that our country, because of the King visions, because of this approach with dedicated agencies, with objective to reach, we managed to reach that. Thank you.
Thank you for this global overview. I'm not done yet with you, Mr. Mulin, because I need to hear you more elaborating about circular economy. But let's take advantage of your presentation to focus more on renewable energy. And we have with us Tariq Haman, as I said, with an impressive experience, both in ONI and in Mazen, around project development. So you have experienced all during this last decade, if we can say, mainly all the development of renewable energy projects in Morocco. So maybe you are the one who can the most share with us, how do you see the challenges that were faced during this last decade, and how these challenges were addressed in order to achieve such world records each time Morocco has developed a renewable energy project. Please, Mr. Hamid.
Thanks, Ali. As you mentioned, Morocco aware of the major challenges facing the humanity due to climate change, and considering the abundant renewable resources at its disposal, the kingdom launched in 2009 under the enlightened vision of Sa Majesty the King Mohammed VI, an energy strategy which dedicated a predominant place to the renewables in the national electricity mix with clear and quantified objectives. You mentioned 42% by 2020, that has been increased to a minimum of 52% by 2030. Therefore, and by today, by the end, in fact, of 2020, more than 4,000 megawatt of solar, wind, and hydro projects are commissioned and under operation, spread over the whole national territory, and which make Morocco today a reference in the energy transition path and in the renewable projection on a continental scale, but also a global one. We can mention here some of the most interesting projects that we develop in Morocco. In the solar field, we do develop with the collaboration, of course, of Aqua Power. I'm sure that Paddy will also give more details about Noor Warzazat, which is the largest multi-technological solar power plant in the world, with more than 580 megawatt of solar generation, all under operation, including different technologies, CSP parabolic throat, but also tower and photovoltaic. What is interesting also to mention about Warzazat is that we have one of the largest molten salt storage capacity in the world with 510 megawatts under operation that allow us to have electricity even during the day, the night, for at least 7 hours. We also develop in Morocco one of the largest wind project in terms of onshore wind, the 850 megawatt integrated project, which is almost developed, and half of it it's under operation, the other is under construction, and we reaches for this project one of the lowest tariff in the world at that time when we opened the bids in 2016. And as you mentioned, thanks to the structuration of the project, the support of the state and the involvement on the whole stakeholders, the maturity of the financial sectors in Morocco, and also the confidence we give to the investors, to developers, and to the banks on our liability to develop such project, on the, let's say, international standard we use for all the documentation, but also the strongness and the clearness of our legal framework that allow us each time to reach one of the best conditions and tariffs in the world for such development.
What is the secret for each time achieving the world record in terms of cost of kilowatt hour?
So it's in fact a combination of different factors. Let's say the first one, a clear objectives, vision, and a roadmap, which give enough confidence to the developers, to the investors, to the banks and the lenders, that we are not talking about only one operation, but we are talking on a pipeline of projects with a clear goals. The other thing is of course, the commitment, the strong commitment of the stakeholders from the top of the state. All the project has been followed with an appropriate monitoring and follow-up. Also, as I mentioned before, the legal framework, which should be clear in a high international standards that give confidence to the developers, but also lenders, Basically, this is the main element that give us this success, but also the strongest of the off-takers, which is Mazen and ONE, that are, I mean, we have now an experience of almost 25 years of IPPs in Morocco. The first one was in 97, and during all this period, all the engagement and commitment from the public side has been done correctly, on time, and this is what gives this success. Maybe I want also to highlight one item, very interesting, and especially for the next panel you are going to have dedicated to Africa. I want to mention here also the experience in the generalization of access to power in Morocco. In fact, in 96, a large program of generalizing access to electricity has been launched by ONE. At that moment, especially in the rural area, only 16% of the population in the rural area has access to electricity. So with a large combination and contribution of the party involved in this program, mainly ONE as a public utility, the local administration, the clients itself, and the state, with a very interesting and innovative structure. Each part contribute almost 25% of each one on the financing of this project. We deploy a very interesting project that allow us, after 10 years, in 2006, to reach 85% of access to electricity. And after 20 years, in 2016, almost 99% of the population has access to electricity. With a financial effort of about $3 billion US, we brought more than 12 million of our citizenship to the light, thanks to the access to electricity. And today, this achievement, with also the Renewable program, is a real success story that we are happy to share with our neighbors and colleagues in Africa. You mentioned some program. We, as Mazen, are developing. The most advanced one, as you mentioned, is with Zambia for 150 megawatt of solar, wind, and hydro project. We are developing with the local utility ZESCO with a very interesting approach, a co-development, sharing our experience and a win-win contribution, but also ONE with its knowledge in electrification that are leading and also supporting our neighbors. The example of Senegal and Chad are one relevant one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haman. It's quite impressive. And thank you for the transition you offer me. Monsieur Kamal Htout, comme vient de le mentionner Monsieur Haman,
we just mentioned, ONE is a main utility in Morocco with great achievements, transitioning from 20% access to electricity to nearly 100% today. All of this has not been done only within the grid, but also off-grid, in order to get electricity to certain localization. There is a link, there is an on-grid strategy and off-grid strategy as well. All of this with the development of some renewable energy projects. What is interesting here is that you have done all of this integration with an integration engineering and planification of very good planification. Can you talk about this, please? As you mentioned, ONE is a main actor in the execution of the strategies. I will come back to the energy strategy that was put in place in 2009 with the orientation of benefiting the locals, and how can I say that? Through this, the massive transition of renewable energy, efficiency, and also regional integration with the interconnections that we have with the electric systems, for example. So, yes, and to stop on reflect on what has been achieved until today, we are at 37% of installed capacity based on renewable energy sources. When it comes to the distribution of this percentage, 27% is in hydraulic, 13% in wind, and the remaining capacity is in solar. All of this is to say that somewhere the realizations were done in a way, how can I say that, on a long run. Because if we talk about hydroelectricity, we need to know that the first unit, hydraulic unit, was made in 1926, and this, of course, this is a long-term work, and there is the link between successful strategies that Morocco chose to have and to implement. We talk about hydroelectricity, and we go back to the strategy, the vision of Morocco in 1967 to have dams which allowed effectively to implement all of this hydroelectric units and plants, which allowed us to have a capacity of around 1,300 watt or something. This is a step, if we go back to 2005, we go to 17% of participation of hydroelectricity in our, or the share of renewable energy in the installed capacity in Morocco. After that, we talk about wind. The wind was the first part realized in 1997 by ONE within the frame of the production of energy. After that, we had EPC realizations after a few years with a capacity, total capacity of 200 megawatt. And then the wind park at this time, it was implemented by IKEO in Africa with 300 megawatt. And after that, of course, the project, integrated wind was launched in 2012, and we saw many successes, including the tariffs and rates from $2.6, and also the integration rate in the industry at 160, more than 160%. We talk also about the Merck program, which is a real success story. It's a program launched in 1995. We were at minus 20 or less than 20% of electrification rate. After 10 years, we went to more than 80%, and now we are nearly practically 99.9% of realization. So, within the realization of the program, we had the recording. And of course, it was not privative. ONE had put in place solutions to electrification, decentralized electrification, as you mentioned, in the public sector and the public sector also, which is a part of solutions that help us to achieve this rate of electrification in Morocco. Of course, when we talk about this, we need to mention also, well, I talked about the production achievements, but we need to say that ONE had also a role in its network. It accompanies all the strategy to promote the grid, of course, the electric network in Morocco, and help all this capacity to go to transit into consumption regions. And of course, we talk about the realization of interconnections, when, notably the link with the European system, 2,500 megawatt realized in 1997 initially, and then after that we had an extension in 2006. We will talk about this later. We will talk about the strategy of maximization by the renewable energy until 2030 via all the connections with our neighbors. But before we do that,
the voice of the private sector. So, Mr. Paddy, Aqua has developed many renewable energy projects in Morocco. So who better than you and Aqua could share with us the views and the analysis of the private sector regarding the field of renewable energy in Morocco? What are the main takeaways that you can share with us from this last decade?
Thank you, Ali. So we entered the electricity generation sector in Morocco in 2010 on the transparent sort of competitive tender, a very well-structured tender that Mazen ran for the first renewable energy CSP project at scale, Node 1, 160 megawatts, 3 hours of storage. And we were very, very delighted to deliver a 26% tariff difference between our submission and the second bidder. And we then gone on to subsequently win several more, to the point where we have a fleet of plants, photovoltaic, wind, and CSP, cumulative value over $3.5 billion US. Many of them with Mazen as our partner. Really, if I kind of boil it all down to, it's just a handful of factors which really does set Morocco apart from many other countries. As Aqua Power, we are privileged to be operating in 13 countries today. But I, not just because I'm on a Moroccan panel, but I've always consistently maintained Morocco sets itself apart on many, many factors. The most fundamental, of course, is that Morocco is it's proven itself to be a very creditworthy environment. And we can now confirm that after 10 years in Morocco. A creditworthy environment, a very well-governed environment, respecting investors, respecting foreign investors at that. So impeccable reputation. So that's perfect as a foundation. But when we come to the green economy and renewable energy, Morocco has got fantastic light, sun, long daylight hours, brilliant wind resources. Now, both of them at one level were a curse in the past for people to live. In fact, the wind is so strong, there are many of these areas, nobody lives there. But it turns out in today's world, they are brilliant resources. And it's most important, domestic resources. It's your own. So that's a wonderful foundation to build on. And most importantly, also, the really entrepreneurial, industrious, artistic as well, people which provide that ecosystem that allows us to deliver competitive price. We can have all the resources, but if people are not available, everything gets very expensive to build and to operate and maintain. Everything will be very expensive. But Morocco provides that ecosystem and a platform, and the industrial infrastructure is there. So these are all brilliant ingredients. But the most important of all, that has really, really given the foundation to propagate the economy, the green economy, both Tariq and you, Ali, have already touched on this, is, and people just sort of overlook this. Back in 2006, 7, 8, for His Majesty, the King of Morocco, this is 15 years ago, 13, 14 years ago, to really support, well, to envision a future of green energy. At that time, when even though Morocco is a fuel importing country, renewable energy was not cheap at the time. The technology was not available at that cost. To have taken that bold decision to say, no, this is the right path, and set, most importantly, a clear strategy and a clear vision, and establish a institution like Mazen to really champion it and to give a framework to ONEE to then partner with Mazen to enable it. That really gives the private sector the confidence to step in and with a longer term vision, really invest.
I would add also a leadership, because I'm traveling in many countries and I see that especially in this sector of electricity, we need a leadership from the highest level of the states. If you want to tackle all the obstacles, go ahead, go fast, and accelerate the dynamic.
Ali, let me just, sorry, on that leadership, let me just point out one thing. So you're absolutely right about the leadership story, because what happens in every country in the world, there are many agencies that are involved in different sectors. Unless there is that clear direction from the top, agencies end up competing with each other. Morocco, all that red tape is cut away because of that very clear direction and leadership, and everyone then coming together to galvanize under it. So, sorry, that was another important point I forgot. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy. But I would like to jump on one thing you said. Morocco has a great legal framework. The infrastructure is there. So I cannot pass without making the link with the new brand of Morocco Invest Now. So tell me, does it mean that Morocco is a good place to invest and to earn money for you?
Look, absolutely. The simple answer is yes. Look, Morocco is a country to reliably make money, but provided you come to create value, deliver value with a long-term mindset. I think that's the most important thing. But it is a reliable platform, reliable country to do that. Yes, the answer is no question.
Good. So let's see how we can mobilize now the private sector to make money, because we don't it's not a shame. We need to provide all the means for the private sector to do business, to earn money, and to initiate and stimulate a real industrial and economical dynamic here in Morocco. Mr. Mounil, back to you. And because we are already out of schedule, I will ask you, please, all of you, to try to summarize in less than 3 minutes. So when we talk about energy transition, most of the time we hear about a green ecosystem around the production of green electricity. And I want to come back to what you said before, the circular green economy, the immersion of a green industrial ecosystem that will attract heavy industries that need energy in the process of transformation. And maybe this is the way to develop Morocco. Please.
Yes, Ali, exactly, because what we heard about renewable, what happened for the big project in renewable energy, is true for all the green economy. We had, during the COP22, why we had a commission dedicated to public-private partnership. We said that the best approach to implement projects, not only for renewables, but for energy efficiency, for circular economy, for all those sectors, for sustainable mobility, all those sectors you can develop if you have the right regulation, because we had this strong political support at the highest levels of the state. When you have this strong political support, you can, as you mentioned, and it is clear that you can put some obstacles away. But it is very important when you have this approach with public-private partnership, when you can also reach the lowest price, because you are with the governance, with the agencies, so you can give vision even to the private sector. visibility for the next, not only 5 years, but for the next 10, 20 years. So they can not only invest in projects, they can invest also in the industry. And this war room dedicated to the green economy is for the industry in renewables, in energy efficiency, in the circular economy. We are going to have all the support for land, for financial support, for regulation. Sometimes you need to change some regulation, especially in the circular economy, to implement some projects. And there's a chance today because what we are looking, because of this approach for decarbonization, all the industries are looking what they can do for the waste, and we are looking at many, many projects. One of the projects I can mention is one dedicated for the automotive industry. They're using biomass fuel today instead of fuel, for their using from waste of oil, olive oils. So we have all the projects linked to that, and that is the key: creating jobs, creating also big projects, and also decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions. So you are having all the points, and you can reach all those points because you have this approach. One thing also, government must lead by example. We have a program dedicated to the government. All the buildings of the government, all the mobility of the government, we should lead by example. And that's why we have a program, and with the Ministry of Finance, it is very important. They have today a solar roof of 200 kilowatt. They're starting for their mobility, also with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So we are looking at how we have this strategy not only for the private sector, not only for the industry, but also for the government. And that's why the Kingdom is today one of the countries that is really in the top in the world. I can say that. Today, the Kingdom, because of this vision, because of our approach, because of our projects implemented. Remember, in 2009, many countries were saying many projects in the world. Who implemented the projects? Not a lot of them. So we are glad that this approach, linking to the, because of a really strong political support, because of the approach with the private sector, because of the legislation that changed, and we have to be really looking what we have to change still in the legislation to implement more and more projects. That's the next step. Why this green economy, war room green economy dedicated to that, was implemented with the different ministries. It's to help all those projects to be implemented.
Good. So, besides initiating a dynamic, the public sector must show the example also. And so, let's go to Mr. Haman. I think all of you are quite aligned. Maybe you prepare it together, the same wording in terms of vision, strategy, framework. So, Mr. Haman, everything is now here on the table to accelerate this dynamic and to push ahead and to raise up our ambition. Please, could you share with us what are the next vision and what are the next objective of Morocco and Mazen regarding the production of green electricity, but also all the other applications like mobility, like hydrogen, green hydrogen, please.
Yes, thanks, Ali. In fact, today and beyond electricity generation, a wider development of the Kingdom's exceptional renewable potential is currently being considered in order to cover sectors that are not directly addressed by the grid, by electricity, and here in particularly industrial sector, transportation, and agriculture. And one of the most promising projects today is, of course, green hydrogen. Everybody is talking about green hydrogen. That today is considered one of the most interesting potential product to replace the fossil fuels, especially in the industrial sector and in the transportation. Of course, one of the main, let's say, driver here and factor are green ammonia that we can produce through green hydrogen. And as you know, Morocco and, of course, OCP are one of the biggest importers of green ammonia in the world, with more than 2 million ton a year. So this here also it's a great potential in terms of valorization of our renewable potential in the industry. And as mentioned by Mr. Mulin, barriers in terms of CO2 impacts will come there, and our industry has a key advantage here in terms of access to green energy to produce clean product that can be well positioned into international market. So for sure, the next generation of project we are developing is around green hydrogen and its different application. I mentioned ammonia, but also self-use, biocarburant that can be used also for transportation, and we are working on that. Mazen launched last year what we call the reference green hydrogen project, industrial scale project we are developing, and the many actors, international developers in the field are interested here to invest, and we are talking of gigawatt. The scale will be dozen, 100 times what is developed here, and we have the potential for that. So another aspect is the export. Many groups are interested in producing electricity in Morocco and export it to Europe, directly to our neighbors where we have connection, as mentioned by Mr. Hatout. We have right now 1,500 capacity connection with Spain. There is also the same capacity with the other neighbors, and we are developing another connection with directly with Portugal. There is project to develop connection directly with UK. Maybe Paddy will add some words about it. So the potential is huge. The opportunities are there, and it's a massive driver for investment in Morocco that will generate job, transfer on how now, and of course, benefit of all the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haman. But I will come back to you later. Monsieur Hatout. L'ONE,
ONE, as we know, has a target today of 52% by 2030, which simply means, as I mentioned, that we need to double the current installed capacity between today and 2030. Beyond that, new applications, new needs are appearing: desalination, electric mobility, decarbonization of industry, and also the production of green hydrogen, and also increasing the capacity and production and decarbonation of the industry, which is an important factor. My question is, what impact do you think this dynamic will have on the objectives of today of 52%? How will ONE adapt once again, as it always showed flexibility and adaptation, even if it is a very important utility? How will you adapt to contribute to this movement quickly, if you may? Yes, allow me please to go back to a point when it comes to private and public sector and the interest, or notably in the electric sector. I wanted to say that here, for example, ONE and also Mazen, in the framework of development of project of energy production, we need to say that ONE developed project. We have 45% of the production of installed capacity facing what if we add what was been produced by Mazen, we can go beyond 60%. So this by itself will show the interest and the importance of the private in the and its contribution to the public sector. We talked about capacity. We can talk about contracts also, the number of contracts that now are signed by OTA. We have 10 contracts. We can have more contracts, I believe. Yes. Let's talk of the future, of new opportunities. We talk about the program that we will attain the target of 52% within the strategy that we have today. As mentioned, we have a need to doubling of renewable capacity, and also effectively because we need to accompany all of this and have the stabilization of the network with this our responsibility of ONE, and also we need to talk about the means of stocking. When we talk about stocking and this step, we need to know that within the framework of this program, the equipment program, we have also stocking capacity. We are at nearly 500 step, and we need also we are realizing 350 megawatt another one, and we have two also upcoming by 2030. So I would like to say also that there is the accompaniment and the reinforcement of the network. We know that of the potential, the huge potential that we have in the south region of wind polar. In order to be able to transfer this energy and transit it to the consumption regions in the north, we need to realize a line of a high tension HDC, which will be realized by the upcoming quarter. So of course the Hammam, and we talk about we are expecting the easing, and also with the connection that we have with the European partners and the connections we have with the neighbors and the alternatives. But here the realization that is still under study of interconnection with the Portugal, as we mentioned, especially the INA, which we need to pursue. Of course, we expect also we are studying the interconnection with the UK. And so mainly these are the main means that we are adapting at ONI in order to accompany all this development, this integration, massive integration of renewables. Thank you.
You mentioned it now that Morocco is turning to export electricity. And now I'm turning to Paddy. And I want to ask you, Mr. Paddy, do you envisage a disruptive positioning in Morocco? I mean that now we all know you produce green electricity and you sell that to Mazen, to the private sector in high voltage. And Mr. Mullin also mentioned the immersion of a decarbonated industry. So how do you see the production of green energy in Morocco? Will you remain as a producer for the Moroccan market? Or do you see it more in terms of exportation of green molecules and green electricity to Europe, for example, or also way to attract heavy industries here in Morocco? Germany developed steel because they had coal. We have green energy. Maybe we can develop glass, steel, etc. And because we do not have a lot of time, and I take a lot of time asking you, I want to ask you a second question also. X-Link is also this kind of disruptive projects in which you are personally involved. And could you then tell us what is it exactly and in what stage of development it is?
So let me quickly answer the first part and the second part. So as Aqua Power, we are entirely focused at power generation and desalinated water production, and we see a huge amount of opportunity as the world moves towards more electricity consumption in Morocco itself to produce more green energy, which in turn can help Morocco green industrialize. But we also are very keen to utilize that green energy to produce hydrogen for export, as well as to attract industrial capacity and industrial development into Morocco. So that's, as Aqua Power, we see that it's clear path. Now, as all your neighbors, including your neighbors to Europe, as well as United Kingdom and further south in Africa itself, as they continue to more and more electrolyze, look at more electricity for consumption, they absolutely are going to need more electricity than they can produce in their own countries. And Morocco is well placed, in my belief, to be generating and to be trading and exporting electricity. So I have personally got involved because this Aqua Power is not in transmission, long distance transmission. So, but I saw this visionary project, and Morocco can become the pioneer to create what ultimately can be an electron superhighway. So this is a very, very ambitious project, but very able and doable project, and it's very well being developed now, fairly advanced, to generate ultimately to generate 10.65 gigawatts of renewable energy in Morocco with 5 gigawatts of battery capacity, all to produce stable energy 22, 23 hours a day to dispatch on a single power line, well, multiple power lines, but running directly from Morocco to the United Kingdom. So this is 3,000, it's about 4,000 kilometers. So, I mean, it's 5 times the scale at which long distance has been achieved so far, but it's very doable. A lot of work is already underway, and very much look forward to energy flowing by 2027 using this link. And this will trigger a wave of energy exports. So in effect, creating a new export for Morocco, green electrons, in addition to all your other exports, agriculture, phosphate, and so on and so forth, and hydrogen in time to come.
So thank you. I wasn't drunk. Saying you are again another time involved in a very destructive initiative. So I think that we have hope, we have good vibes, as we say, that were shared during this panel for the next decade in Morocco in the field of renewable energy. And to conclude, I would like to give the opportunity to Mr. Haman to give us a very short conclusion because we are out of schedule. Mr. Haman, please.
I just want to say Morocco now, it's the place to be for investing, especially in the power sector and the renewables, because we have all the complement that is needed for, of course, generating electricity, but also to contribute to the decarbonization through different use. We mentioned green hydrogen and all the application that can be around to produce products that are fully green, using green electricity and green energy, but also export. And it's a real also hub in order to address different market with the whole trade agreement we have, of course, with our partners in Europe, US, and also with our African countries. So thanks, Ali.
Okay, Mr. Mulin, 30 seconds, please.
For the whole green economy investment, Morocco is ready politically. Morocco is ready technically. Morocco is ready legally for any investment, and you'll have all the support. That's why all the policy today, and we have a new minister dedicated to energy transition and sustainable development since a few days now. So we are really pushing for all the investment, and you are all invited to look at all the incentives that you can have in the kingdom.
Thank you, distinguished guests and speakers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us during this first panel. Do not quit. In less than 5 minutes, we are moving to the next panel. Thank you again. So, dear honorable guests and ladies and gentlemen, I'm really pleased to introduce and to moderate today this very important panel around the new perspectives of cooperation. And we have the presence of Dr. Mansour Muhtar, who is the Vice President, Country Programming of the Islamic Development Bank. Previously, Dr. Muhtar, you served as an Executive Director on the board of the World Bank Group, as well as co-chair of the UN Intergovernmental Committee of Experts on Sustainable Development Finance. You also served as a Minister of Finance for the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the Chairman of the National Economic Management Team as Executive Director, African Development Bank, and as Director General of Nigeria's Debt Management Office. A very long and impressive CV to show you how much I'm pleased to have you today in this panel, Dr. Mansour. Hello, Dr. Mansour.
Hello, good to be with you. The pleasure is mine, actually.
Thank you. We move now to Mr. Fathallah Sijilmasi. I think that many Moroccans know him as a very important diplomat career person in Morocco, but due to technical issues, he could not participate with us today. So let me introduce Mr. I'm looking for my notes, so I'm sorry. Dr. Daniel Alexander Short. Hi, Dr. Daniel.
Good morning, good afternoon, Ali, and it's a pleasure being part of this important panel discussion.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Daniel. You are acting director for renewable energy and energy efficiency, and also you are the advisor of the vice president of IFDB for power, energy, climate, and green growth at the African Development Bank. In your capacity, you oversee the bank's lending and non-lending activities in the renewable energy and energy efficiency space, including the Sustainable Energy Funds for Africa, more known as CEFA, and the Desert to Power Initiative. You were also previously the coordinator of the Sustainable Energy for All Africa Hub, and prior to that, and prior to joining IFDB, you worked for several years for the European Commission in both headquarters and the field and for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, and in the private sector. So now let me introduce you Mr. Amjad Abdullah, who is the head of partnerships at the IRENA. He was also the chief negotiator for Alliance of Small Island Developing States and lead OOCs to lead to Paris Agreement and former chair of LDC Group in international climate change process. You were also a vice chair of Working Group 3 of IPCC and a member of IPCC Bureau. Good afternoon, Mr. Amjad.
Good afternoon, Ali. Very nice to be here with the esteemed panel members.
My pleasure, my pleasure. And let me introduce you. Great. She just connected Mr. Mathilde Serravolo just on time.
Hello.
So Mr. Mathilde Serravolo is a development economist, head of sector in EU delegation to Morocco, where she leads cooperation on competitiveness, infrastructure, and environment. I think, Mr. Mathilde, you have 20 years of experience in Africa and Latin America. You have designed and implemented and monitored cooperation programs related to environment, rural development, private sector development, human rights, governance, and public finance, and education, security, and justice. I didn't want to mention everything, but we have a lot of sectors. So among that, Mr. Mathilde is also expert in the field of renewable energy. For over 13 years, you have been working for the European Commission, contributing to a fruitful cooperation with several countries of Central and South America. Good afternoon, and it's Great to have you today.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invite.
So let me go directly to the subject and give the first words to His Excellency Dr. Mansour Muhtar. Why a multilateral development institution like ISDB should support cooperation in developing clean energy in its member countries? You are deploying a lot of efforts beside the countries to help them to finance projects, to structure projects, and to make projects on the ground. Why are you doing all of this? Please.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. And let me begin, of course, by conveying the Islamic Development Bank's unflinching support for clean energy in its member countries. We are a multilateral development finance institution, just as a context setting. And together with other MDBs, we remain committed, and we've expressed this commitment in various fora, to supporting climate change objectives of our member countries. In particular, we've committed to making an increasing share of our financing flow to them in a manner that is consistent with the pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilience. And I would also add that the bank, like other MDBs, is also deeply committed to supporting its member countries in achieving the Sustainable Development Goal 7, which aims at ensuring universal access to sustainable energy sources. And to illustrate our level of commitment as an institution, I want to point out that we have, since inception, contributed to the development of renewable energy projects in our member countries by providing a total financing of nearly $3 billion through several projects and programs. And in addition, I should also point out that our recently formulated energy sector policy places an emphasis on increasing the renewable energy portion in the energy mix of our member countries. Now back to the principal question of cooperation as a tool or enabler in developing clean energy. Here, I start with the premise, grounded on concrete evidence, that there is discrepancy between ISDB member countries in terms of electricity access and developing renewable energy projects. And just to illustrate by way of illustration, in some North African countries such as Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, we see ongoing efforts and recorded successes towards increasing the renewable energy portion in the energy mix. And also in the GCC countries, we now see greater priority attention being given to renewable energy power generation. And efforts are being exerted to attract big private sector companies for implementing solar projects with record competitive prices. But at the other end of the spectrum, we find energy deficit sub-Saharan African countries that are still lagging far behind, despite their enormous natural potential. And we see this disparity in expertise and the level of involvement in terms of regulations and projects in the energy sector among ISDB member countries as creating an opportunity for countries to benefit from each other. We believe that we can capitalize on the success and experience gained by some of our member countries to share proven solutions and transfer the relevant know-how to other member countries facing difficulties in boosting their electrification rate and developing their renewable energy potential. And of course, there are various possibilities in this regard, including looking at ways of developing and adopting suitable institutional arrangements, setting up suitable legal and regulatory framework that would attract private sector, and enhancing the capacity of the member countries in the renewable energy field at various levels, both at individual, organizational levels, including in the design of projects, in their structuring, in their execution, and above all, in their operationalization. So I think that it's very clear that this Islamic Development Bank, we feel and we believe that this is the right approach to take in supporting our member countries.
It's great to see how ISDB is taking its responsibilities towards its member states by accompanying them in structuring and financing projects. And thank you for having shared with us all the areas where you intervene and you bring a real added value to SDB member states. So in the same line, we have with us Dr. Daniel Alexander Short, and IFDB is also very committed in the continent. We can say that IFDB at the continental level is like the financial arm of many countries in the continent. IFDB were very involved in the project development in Morocco, you are across the continent. So it's quite impressive to see how much you are also committed and you are deploying that energy to help the countries to develop sustainable energy without playing on the word. So, Mr. Daniel, could you please share with us what are the main actions you are implementing in this field? And also, could you share with us if there are any actions that are being implemented with Morocco as a continental leader in the field of renewable energy, and to understand more what you are doing regarding continental cooperation and South-South cooperation?
Thank you very much, Ali, and again, thank you to you and Mazen to invite the African Development Bank to this important discussion. As you've highlighted, the African Development Bank has placed energy at the very top of its priorities for the African continent, with the New Deal on Energy for Africa strategy that we launched in 2016. And of course, the recognition that energy plays a critical role for development at large. And I always like to quote the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who coined, I think, the very astute phrase that energy is the golden thread that connects everything. Just to highlight, and Mansour has referred to that at the moment we still have roughly 3/4 of the population globally without access to energy or access to electricity, more specifically, located on the African continent. So clearly, this has to be a key priority for a development finance institution. Just to give another example of this critical role that energy plays for development, if we look at the health sector, which is of course crucially important also in the current context and the fight against COVID-19, and there's just a very worrying statistic that close to 60% of sub-Saharan African health centers still lack access to electricity today. So that really underlines the critical role and importance that energy has on the African continent. In the same vein, the African Development Bank has put a particular emphasis on scaling up the tremendous and still largely untapped renewable energy potential of Africa. Just to give some figures, we've increased our share of financing towards renewable energy generation from just a mere 9% in the first decade of the century to over 70% in the second decade. And since the launch of the New Deal, that figure has increased to over 80% of our investments in generation capacity. And that is clearly the direction of travel that we are seeing, and the direction of travel that the African Development Bank, in line with its commitment also on the broader climate change agenda, is taking. Let me just highlight a couple of key priorities in that context from our perspective. One is, of course, we're trying to scale up utility scale renewable energy generation across the continent. We've been financing various renewable technologies. You mentioned our close collaboration with Morocco and Mazen in terms of building up the solar generation capacity in Morocco, with the Assad plant, of course, as well as the Midelt 800 megawatt plant. And of course, we've been investing in other technologies as well, from Lake Turkana, the largest wind farm in sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya, to geothermal in several countries, to hydro, of course, which has also tremendous potential across the continent. And this is, of course, triggered to a large extent also by the increasing cost competitiveness of renewables. Those are just the most economic solution in many respects now across the continent. Just to give one example, we had a financial close of a project we financed in Egypt earlier this year, a 200 megawatt solar PV project for Mombo, which just has a tariff of 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's incredibly cheap and obviously enormously attractive. But the second priority also links to one of the challenges that we are still seeing in terms of the variability of some of the renewable energy sources, particularly solar and wind, and hence the need to invest more into the transmission and distribution networks across the continent, including some of the critical regional interconnections. And that has been and still is a key priority for the African Development Bank. And this is also where we are actively working with many partners and of course our continental partner institutions such as the African Union on the continental programs such as the Continental Transmission Master Plan or the Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa. The third aspect that I would like to highlight that is a very key dimension is that we will not be able to achieve universal access to electricity in Africa without a massive scale-up of decentralized energy access solutions across the continent in the form of mini-grids, in the form of solar home systems. So that has been another area where the bank has taken a very active role in terms of building markets for these type of solutions, for example, through our Green Mini-Grid Market Development Program, but also financing large-scale programs, such as the largest mini-grid development program in Nigeria, the Nigeria Electrification Program, to just mention one example. I think overall, our role, and that's sort of, I would say more generally, the role of development finance institutions here is to also catalyze more private sector investment. So that is a key dimension. I think if you want to move from billions to trillions, as was said in the Financing for Development conference a few years back in Addis, that is a key priority. And from our side, we focus on two key aspects. One is to work on policy de-risking, for example, having standardized approaches to procurement of renewables, working on the regulatory and policy legal systems, as also highlighted previously, but also financial de-risking. And here as a key focus on project preparation support, looking at blended finance approaches. For example, we set up the Facility for Energy Inclusion to really focus on the smaller scale solutions, bringing in some of that very concessional junior capital to make that blended finance structure work, working closely in this context also with the European Commission that provided some of that critical junior capital in the Facility for Energy Inclusion. But we're also scaling up some of our in-house facilities, particularly the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, which has now also a key component on green baseload, trying to help work with countries on power system flexibility, on innovative new solutions such as battery storage, all with a perspective on increasing the share of renewables in the energy mix. We're working also closely with Morocco, and Morocco clearly is one of the leaders in this area. There's a lot of expertise in Morocco that can and should be deployed in South-South cooperation to other countries in the region. We've, for example, facilitated on a number of occasions also study tours, visits of representatives from other countries to learn from the Moroccan experience, for example, in the solar site. Morocco is also one of the focus countries in the context of the Energy Transition Council work, and clearly taking a very innovative and lead role on many new areas, such as, for example, green hydrogen. So we are certainly looking forward to intensifying our collaboration with Morocco and helping also to make sure that some of this expertise is deployed to the benefit of some of the other countries on the continent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And it was great to hear about the three pillars you mentioned, including the construction of the grid and the off-grid. And I think you will elaborate more deeply about the cooperation with Mazen or Morocco when I will come back to you. I would like now to move to Mrs. Mathilde Serravolo. I would like to say in terms of cooperation that Europe has today two strategic energy partnerships with Northern African countries. And now Europe is looking forward to develop a third one. So the two first are mainly based on gas supply. And now you have entered into discussion or negotiations with Morocco in order to elaborate a Moroccan EU green partnership as a continuation of the European Green Deal. So I think that this negotiation or this discussion is kind of a recognition of the Moroccan leadership in the field of renewable energy. What I understood is that this Green Deal between Morocco and EU will not limit to renewable energy, but it will cover all the aspects of the green economy. Could you please tell why it is so important for both parties, EU and Morocco, to achieve this cooperation, and what are both parties are expecting from it?
Thank you, Ali. Many thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. That's my first official appearance since I am in this post. So I'm really happy to share this moment with you.
You appear very well.
And discuss this topic. Thank you. Thank you. So the first thing I would like to recognize is that we see from the EU Morocco as a visionary in terms of energy strategy, and that's something that goes back several years. Since the beginning of the millennium, Morocco decides to invest in renewable energies and understands, Morocco is one of the first to understand that switching to renewable energy, or the growing importance of renewable energy as the future, that the future will not only depend on oil, as we've been doing, but to be on the market, to be competitive in the future, we need to embrace renewable energies and develop that all that sector. So the EU shares that vision and has supported Morocco for several years now in different programs, different sorts of renewable energies, be it solar, wind. The Ouarzazate plant is a very good example of how Morocco is doing it and how different donors have engaged in creative, if you want, financial structure that allows everyone to come in. Daniel already discussed the blending work and how we as development donors need to find a way to mobilize more and more funds. We know that official development aid is not enough for all we have committed to do in the framework of Paris, in the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we need to mobilize private funds, and we need to mobilize investments so that the future we are dreaming of together is really possible, so that we can make it there. So that was to say that this partnership with Morocco has been developing along a few years now. It's not something new. We share, the European Union and Morocco, this long-term vision of a sustainable planet. We share commitment to climate neutrality by 2050, which implies a lot. It's a very big commitment and requires very big transition of the way we do basically everything, the way we heat, the way we lighten, and the way we transport, we do tourism, how we dress ourselves. So it's a really substantial transformation of the whole economy. And that's what is also reflected in the EU Green Deal. The European Green Deal is the first action or the first strategy that the new European a couple of years back, Commission von der Leyen adopts as soon as she takes office. And it is to say that transition to sustainability is the way Europe will do things, not only as an environmental strategy, but as an economic strategy. So investing in the transition, investing in the planet, if you wish, investing in our future is the way we will also generate jobs, generate competitiveness, empower people, and make sure to leave no one behind. So that is a very, very important strategy. I think it is important to understand it's the vision of the future that the EU wants as designed, as committed to for its own, for the European region, but it's also the model we want to work with our partner to reach. It's not something that we will do alone. And we are all together in this plan. We need to work together to reach these ambitions. So we are very proud to be able to work with partners like Morocco who have the same vision, and we can then share the work together. We can share the experience together. We can learn how to do things together, exchange on all of that. And energy is at the heart of all this transition. I've already said the transition covers all sectors: transport, sustainable cities, education, tourism, really everything, but energy is at the heart of it. If you don't have sustainable energy, no other sector will be sustainable. So there is a really strategic interest to make sure that we can provide the energy to all those economic activities so that they can develop and they can be sustainable on their own. And decarbonization is at the heart of it. We do nothing, we don't manage to decarbonize and allow the private sector to be competitive in the future, because the future will be decarbonized, the future will have to be sustainable. And therefore, we need to prepare our economies and prepare the skills of laborers, for instance, to embrace that future. And that's something we're doing in Morocco, for instance, with the vocational training of youngsters who are preparing to have the skills that the new market will need. So in this framework, and I'm coming to the answer, Ali, we are thinking the green partnership with Morocco. There are a few in the words. So the Green Deal is the European strategy, and then the EU has spotted a few partners who have the same visions as I mentioned, and who are able to engage in a partnership with us on all those areas, on how will we manage to reach our commitments for climate neutrality. Therefore, Morocco is one of those partners with which we will be able to discuss all the areas that I've mentioned, and energy will be part of it. It's not only a green energy partnership, but it's a green partnership that will also cover blue economy, for instance, that will cover, of course, decarbonization and the work with the private sector. And what do we expect from the partnership? Well, what partners do probably to have a dialogue, to have trust, to be leveraging ambitions, because when there's two, you can walk faster and further. We can share competences, and we can be an example. We can give an example to the region that it is possible. Morocco can really be, in our view, a leader in the region to show how sustainability can be reached, how climate neutrality can be reached, and hopefully this will inspire others to go along that path.
Thank you, Mr. Serravolo. I think you detailed all the actions that could occur around energy transition. And I know that IRENA is one of the central players in the world leading this energy transition towards renewable energy. ARENA has developed many bilateral cooperations with the countries, but also trilateral cooperations. ARENA is accompanying LDCs to accelerate their access to energy, and developed countries to accelerate their energy transition to renewable energy. I think that all the studies and all the insights that are shared by ARENA are very important and interesting. And I would like to ask you, Mr. Amjad Abdullah, what kind of cooperation, more precisely, do you implement for this purpose, and how do you see the South-South cooperation in facilitating your strategy of scaling up the deployment of renewable energy? Basically, because Southern countries are sharing the main challenges. They often meet the same obstacles. So the tools to tackle these obstacles are quite the same. So how do you envisage to capitalize on this South-South cooperation to accelerate all the dynamic of energy transition?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali. I think, as you rightly said, that as the apex intergovernmental agency on energy transition and the promotion of renewable energy, which nearly a universal membership with 166 full members and 18 countries in existence, ARENA obviously serves as the principal platform for international cooperation, a center of excellence, and a repository of policy, technology, resources, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. You outline a number of things in your brief background and the question. Obviously, ARENA promotes the widespread adoption and sustainable use of all forms of renewable energy, including bioenergy, geothermal, hydropower, ocean, solar, and wind energy in the pursuit of sustainable development, energy access. I know many have spoken, especially in Africa and in the developing world, and especially in LDCs, and energy security and low carbon economic growth and prosperity. Obviously, supporting governments to adopt enabling policies for renewable energy investments, provides practical tools and policy advice to accelerate renewable energy deployment, and we do facilitate knowledge sharing and technology transfer, and to provide clean, sustainable energy for the world's growing population. As you rightly mentioned, one of the ARENA's flagship publications is the World Energy Transition Outlook, which just recently launched, outlines a pathway for the world to achieve the Paris Agreement goals and hold the pace of climate change by transforming the global energy landscape. This report presents options to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius and bring carbon dioxide emissions to a net zero by 2050. Obviously offering high level of insights on technology choices, investment needs, policy frameworks, and socio-economic impacts of achieving sustainable development, resilient, and inclusive energy future. ARENA's knowledge and analytical work on the energy transition also extends to hard to decarbonize sectors such as transport and industries. Furthermore, ARENA also supports the energy through advice. For example, auctions, regulations, project facilitation support is the main pillar, and the country and regional engagement initiatives and strategic partners. I'll come back to the number of partnerships that we have recently signed up, including Morocco. ARENA is presently also engaging with 71 countries, offering them around 144 work packages, ranging from data, statistics, policy and finance, advisory, resource assessment, sectoral analysis, and end-use sectors, and project facilitation for the implementation of renewable energy-related targets of the country's NDCs, more specifically in Africa and in LDCs. Given that ARENA's convening power and outreach, we intend to promote a greater learning and knowledge exchange that will also be promoting South-South cooperation, not only South-South, but triangular cooperation as well. And this has been operationalized through initiatives such as the IRENA collaborative framework. In particular, for example, the one on higher shares of renewable energy, which is a platform dialogue and knowledge exchange. You've also recently signed the Memorandum of Understanding with Kingdom of Morocco. I'll come back to that in the latter part of the question.
Yeah.
Over to you, Ali. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I move now to Dr. Mansour Mortar for a second time. And so let's focus more on the South-South cooperation, and mainly the one with Morocco. So I would like to ask you, Dr. Mansour, how the bank is considering supporting scaling up clean energy through cooperation, and what are the tools that you are implementing towards this energy transition in the frame, of course, of South-South cooperation?
Thank you. Let me start first by referring to the overarching framework for our activities in terms of the internal policies and institutional arrangements that we have in place to support intervention in both renewable energy and intertwining it with cooperation. And in terms of the energy sector, we recognize, of course, in recognition of the significance of energy in the development of member countries, we formulated an energy sector policy and strategy to provide the framework, principles, and operational modalities to guide the bank's energy sector engagement. And this strategy aims to address energy inequality and lack of affordability, as well as access to clean and sustainable energy options. One of the main pillars of ICT strategy, of course, is increasing renewable energy in member countries. On the other side of the coin, we are attaching growing importance to regional cooperation as an opportunity to assist our member countries' development efforts. And the regional cooperation is at the heart of our operations, and I would say a part of our DNA, being the only South-South multilateral development institution. And we see opportunities for forging this solidarity among our member countries. And in that regard, we recently adopted a new regional cooperation and integration policy, which is aimed at helping the bank harness its collective institutional strengths and resources to support member countries and regional organizations through investments and operations by expanding the creation and sharing of knowledge and information. And as one of its mechanisms to support cooperation, the bank is using its homegrown South-South cooperation modality, which we call reverse linkage, to enhance partnerships across a wide spectrum of sectors and thematic areas. And this modality aims to capitalize on existing expertise and know-how in the member countries and the global South to address specific development challenges on mutually arranged for all stakeholders and with special focus on results. And renewable energy is one of the sectors where the reverse linkage is being adopted and scaled up. While we're noting that Morocco is one of the early adopters of renewable energy in ISDP member countries, having successfully developed a series of renewable energy projects, including particularly the 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 4 projects with a capacity of almost 600 megawatts. We saw a good opportunity here for sharing knowledge or facilitating the sharing of knowledge, expertise, and experience. And I'm proud to mention that this opportunity is being seized now. We are working hand in hand with Morocco through ONI and Mason under a win-win reverse linkage arrangement. With Mason, the bank established a strategic partnership that aims at developing PPP utility scale renewable energy projects in sub-Saharan Africa. In this context, we are seeking to build on the unique and rich expertise of Mason, as well as, of course, its willingness, interest, and commitment in developing renewable energy projects to transfer its know-how and expertise in Africa. This partnership was launched at the end of December 2020 during a ministerial conference hosted by the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Environment of Morocco. It is noteworthy that already in 2021, 2 operations under this partnership admission are being developed for Djibouti and Niger Republic. In addition to this important initiative, the bank is considering scaling up its intervention in the renewable energy sector by developing a dedicated renewable energy program to leverage financing from the private sector and other institutional and technical parties. As was pointed out by my African Development Bank colleague, leveraging is key to really garnering the resources needed to address the SDG challenges facing our member countries. And this program would capitalize on the already engaged cooperation with some identified technical partners, such as Mason, and the reverse linkage modality, of course. And we expect and we hope that we'll be able to crowd in and engage more partners in this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mansour. I think you are right putting the know-how exchange and the transfer of know-how as a pillar of the South-South cooperation, because maybe it's the real added value of South-South cooperation. And so let me I will jump on Dr. Daniel and move directly to Madame Serravolo, because she has a very important constraint, just to ask you the second question. So in terms of cooperation in the field of renewable energy, Morocco, you know that Morocco is very active at the multilateral and at a bilateral level. For example, Morocco has engaged at the regional level an initiative with EU, which is SET Roadmap, that stands for Sustainable Electricity Trade Roadmap, that involves 5 countries, Morocco and 4 European countries, with the aim to integrate the renewable energy markets. EU, I know that EU is very supportive of that, and maybe the best proof is the signature of a declaration between these 5 countries at Brussels, hosted by the European Commission. And beside this, as Dr. Mansour mentioned, the cooperation with ISDB for providing technical assistance to ISDB member states. And you know that Morocco is very committed to initiate a global dynamic by assisting southern countries to accelerate their strategies in the field of renewable energy. What kind of trilateral cooperation could we envisage between Morocco and the EU? So 2 questions.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for that, Daniel, and in advance I apologize for having to leave at 10:30 sharp. So I have another commitment. So I will try to respond as much as possible to all the questions. First of all, we have already discussed the partnership, the green partnership between the European Union and Morocco. And being partner also means integrating. It's not only a declaration of intent. Of course, it is important to have a common intent, but partnership is very concrete, and it comes down to very concrete actions that we can do together. And being partners means integrate and working together and work in the region. And I will take again the expression of the DNA. Regional integration is part of the DNA of the European Union. As you know, we are an integrated region, so it is not surprise that the EU supports a regional integration and regional cooperation as something we strongly believe in, as a way to strengthen and to improve and to go further together, as I already said. And in this sense, the EU is investing strongly in Africa. Africa is a priority region for our cooperation, and especially energy in Africa is big priorities with the Africa-EU Green Energy Initiative. I think in his previous intervention, Daniel already explained very well why it is so important to work in the region on this and ensuring that African people, businesses and industries have access to affordable energy, to an efficient energy. We need to ensure also energy efficiency to make sure that there is enough for everyone, and we need to support investment in the renewable energy as an opportunity for the region. Last week, McKinsey published a report showing how the decarbonization in Africa can create a huge amount of jobs. I think they were talking about tens of thousands of jobs that can be created for the region if we invest in energy and in decarbonization. So it is something very important. Triangular cooperation is part of that, and it comes to well, as I said before, making sure that our best experiences are shared and we can learn from each other, and the EU will be ready to support that in the region. Now, coming specifically on the SET roadmap, the sustainable energy trade. As you mentioned, Ali, this initiative is an initiative of our member states. The European Union as such is not an official stakeholder of the initiative, but it is Germany, France, Spain and Portugal who are engaged in this initiative with Morocco, with the objective to get some energy integrating the energy market. And as European Union, we cannot but support the initiative. We have accompanied and observed it with a lot of interest, and we still believe in it, and we do think that's the way to go. And in the long term, it is very much in line with the objective of the Green Deal, which I've already explained, which has as part of its objective to create an integrated energy market in Europe, where the production of energy can benefit all our member states. And well, in many aspects, we've been working with Morocco for this integration in the European market, which requests some level of convergence of legislation, of regulation, agreeing on the terms and on the definitions. But then we see a lot of opportunity, of potential to this integration. So yes, to resume all I've said very, very shortly, we are very supportive of the idea of this SET roadmap. And we remain positive to support the next step and see it a reality very soon.
Thank you, Mathilde. Thank you for being with us. And let me come back to Daniel. So, Dr. Daniel, back to the disruptive initiative of Desert to Power that relies also mainly on the principle of South-South cooperation, and that you are leading, I think, closely with Mazen, with Morocco through Mazen. I think that many crucial steps have been achieved in the development of this initiative. I know that you have formed and set up a task force that is working day and night to make this very important initiative going faster and advancing faster. Could you give us, please, more information about this strategic initiative, where you are, and what is the expected role of Morocco and Mazen within this initiative, please?
Thank you very much, Ali. Indeed, the Desert to Power initiative is a flagship initiative for the bank, really trying to seize the tremendous solar potential of the Sahel region, from Senegal in the west all the way to Djibouti and Eritrea in the east, with an initial focus particularly on the G5 Sahel countries. We have secured from the G5 Sahel countries already the end of 2019 a mandate from the heads of state for the Desert to Power initiative. In fact, the mandate and a commitment that was reiterated in their last heads of state summit in July this year. We have adopted a clear implementation approach. It's a holistic approach, so looking at 5 priorities: scaling up utility scale solar generation, investments in the critical transmission and distribution infrastructure, scaling up decentralized energy access solutions to increase energy access, addressing the situation of the power utilities in the countries, which is particularly critical from the perspective of facilitating more private sector investments. And of course, the utilities are the off-takers for those IPPs. And the priority around strengthening the enabling policy, legal, regulatory environment, and cross-cutting capacity building sort of as a priority throughout all these areas. We have developed with the countries, and that's always, from my perspective, very important, clear plans. So we developed national desert to power roadmaps. Those were developed in partnership with many stakeholders, and they were validated by the countries at the end of last year. Those set out the targets at the national level. They identified priority actions and have also identified an initial set of priority projects. So we were able in that context for the G5 Sahel to identify over 85 priority projects that, if implemented, would lead, just one example, to over 2 gigawatts of solar generation capacity and will require at least $3 billion in terms of investment. We've also just recently in a ministerial meeting with the
Daniel, this amount of investment, is it limited to the solar capacity, or does it include also the infrastructure, electrical infrastructure that is needed to evacuate electricity?
It also, I mean, this is referring specifically to those initial 85 projects that were identified, and those projects are not only generation projects, they're also projects in the other 4 priority areas. And sort of our estimate is that these projects alone will require at least $3 billion in terms of investments. Those projects alone will not be sufficient, however, to achieve the targets of the Desert to Power national roadmaps. That will require additional investment because some projects obviously have not been identified yet in order to reach those targets. Just to highlight very quickly that we also were able to adopt a regional roadmap that's really looking at some of the priorities that are best addressed at the regional level. For example, some of the critical regional interconnections. For example, one concrete example, we're working with the G5 Sahel, with the West African Power Pool on feasibility work for a Sahel transmission backbone that would connect all the G5 Sahel countries and would be a key route to evacuate some of the generation capacity, particularly from the regional solar parks that are under development, but in the context of the West African Power Pool. We've also, as you mentioned it, established implementation structure. We have a dedicated task force hosted by the bank, but very much a partnership with other institutions. And in this context, particularly, I'd like also to highlight the support that is being provided by Mazen, who dedicated a resource to work with the task force on a full-time basis. We have established a steering committee, which is chaired by the chairman, by the CEO of Mazen, given the tremendous, of course, experience that he has and that Morocco has in building up solar generation capacity. But it's a steering committee that includes many partners, including, for example, IRENA, just to mention one. And we've also working with dedicated national country focal points and implementation structures that are under development at the country level. One of the key priorities that we've been placing a lot of emphasis on is on the aspect of resource mobilization. One aspect there is project preparation. I mentioned those number of projects that have been identified. When analyzing these projects in detail, it became very clear that more than 2/3 of these projects are still very early stage. So there's a lot of project preparation support required to bring them to a stage where financing institutions can then invest in. So we're mobilizing project preparation sources from different facilities. For example, we approved December last year a large-scale TA program from our Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa to help with some of the critical project preparation and, for example, grid integration studies in the G5 Sahel countries. We're also working on mobilizing sort of larger pools of concessional finance. And in that context, I'm very pleased to mention that we secured last week the approval from the Green Climate Fund for the Desert to Power Sahel G5 financing facility, which will include $150 million of concessional resources from the Green Climate Fund that will be blended with the bank's resources, but also resources from other partners with a perspective of scaling up solar generation capacity in the G5 Sahel. So just to highlight that, as I mentioned, Mazen has been from the start a strategic partner in this initiative. He is supporting the various activities, and we are also looking in that context into ways of how that expertise that Mazen has in terms of developing these type of projects can be made available to the Sahel countries in the context of Desert to Power. So there are already a number of initial activities ongoing. We hope to scale these up going forward in that partnership with Mazen. Let me stop here, but happy to come back if there are any follow-up questions.
Thank you, Daniel. I think with your intervention and the intervention of Dr. Mansour, we now have two important personalities that are kind of recognizing the Moroccan and Mazen expertise, and that are working with Mazen to capitalize in it in order to accelerate the dynamic of access to energy in LDCs and ODCs and mainly of Africa. So it gives me also a good transition to ask my question to Mr. Amjad Abdullah. So Mr. Amjad, you're aware that Morocco and Ethiopia have launched under the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019 a disruptive initiative that is called Coalition for Sustainable Electricity or Energy Access for LDCs and ODCs. And this coalition is the first time in the history of UN that two southern countries are partnering together to design a southern initiative made by southern countries for southern countries. And IRENA has formalized its engagement in the advisory board of its initiative. And I think that you are expected to play a major role in the development of the Secretariat and the roadmap or specific actions within this initiative. This, in addition to the cooperation agreement that you have signed with Morocco, lastly, could you tell us how do you see the development of the South-South cooperation, and more precisely, how do you see the development of ties and links between you and Morocco to accelerate the energy transition?
Thank you very much, Ali. That is correct. Yes, we have recently signed the MOU, and Morocco, fortunately, happens to be one of the pioneering countries with IRENA that has signed a strategic engagement agreement. Of course, before I directly answer to your question, let me also highlight the key four broad areas of the agreement. That is to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy with a focus on the dissemination and use of analysis on socioeconomic benefits, with an emphasis on the development of new value chains, job creation, very important, at the national level, and lessons learned on the wider region. Of course, facilitating the deployment of renewable energy technologies and solutions for deep decarbonization, including technology and market outlook studies on the production of green hydrogen by providing a platform for peer-to-peer exchange and facilitate potential collaboration with the private sector to conduct research and development. Strengthen policies and regulations, obviously mainly with the private sector. The agreement will pave the way forward for increased finance and investments in renewable energy, including climate finance, through development of solid project pipelines, support for project preparation, for improved bankability and facilitation of access to finance, including in the context of sustainable energy access and climate investment platform. Obviously, Ali, you mentioned a very important point that you know, one of the main events of the United Nations in 2019, Morocco and Ethiopia jointly launched this initiative, and IRENA is very pleased to be part of the advisory panel. And IRENA stands ready to support the lubrication of this initiative as well. Just to include, just to mention that IRENA, through the SIDS Lighthouse Partnership, is also acting as the enabler for the Small Island Development States Compact that was also submitted. So IRENA adds a lot of value. So I'm more than happy to be part of that. And IRENA's convening power, we can use it, I'm sure. With this, we are more than glad to be part of this initiative, and then to strengthen the secretarial support in terms of you know, interim work, whatever that you request. I can assure that IRENA stands more than ready. As you mentioned again earlier, the government, the agreement also will facilitate the South-South cooperation through expert exchange, knowledge sharing, strengthen regional initiatives, including in the context of the collaborative framework. Of course, specific on the Coalition for Sustainable Energy Access, climate investment funds, IRENA will also support capacity development, knowledge exchange, to mention some of these. Again, Ali, very, very pleased to be part of this you know, advisory panel as a permanent member. I know that we have recently nominated the director of the country engagement as the member of the permanent advisory panel of this initiative. And again, IRENA stands ready to materialize this initiative, and looking forward to working with you and to make South-South, South-South-North triangular cooperation to work success. And IRENA recently, with the new vision of the Director General, IRENA looking forward to energy transition, climate action, and building partnership, enduring partnership is a key for success. I thank you very much, Ali.
Thank you very much, Abdullah, Mr. Abdullah, for all your insights. I think that I cannot conclude this very important panel without allowing me to ask Dr. Mansour if you can yourself conclude this panel, sharing with us maybe what could be the key success factors to further develop South-South cooperation, and what you are expecting during the next decade in terms of achievements in the field of renewable energy among your member states. Please, the stage is for you, Dr. Mansour.
Thank you. Well, this has been a very enriching discussion, and I've enjoyed listening to colleagues, other participants, to learn about what they are doing and to see that there are possibilities really for leveraging each other's efforts. So the first point to make is that these partnerships, the scope of these partnerships need to be expanded, and to see how we could mutually support each other in driving this agenda forward. I particularly noted some of the very exciting and high-level initiatives that are being led by the African Development Bank, and I see already potential for collaboration, particularly on the Sahel initiative, where we are working in parallel with the UN now to see what we could come up with. In fact, it's something I've been working on to try to get other Arab Coordination Group members involved in an initiative for the development of the Sahel. And that features areas related to what we've been discussing. So that pooling, in fact, renewable energy comes tops, and that I can show you about it. This is what we've been working on this morning. So it's really music to my ears to know that we could scale up our efforts, we could pool, leverage, and exploit synergies and complementarities in what we're doing. It's also gratifying to note that this agenda is gaining a foothold in terms of really its acceptability among our member countries. And I think that's a key lesson to learn, that our member countries, they have to own these initiatives that we are pushing forward. And for me, we need to invest a lot more effort in getting them to be in the driver's seat in driving some of these initiatives. The third thing is to really see how we can showcase some of the ongoing and promising initiatives and to encourage the crowding in of other parties, private sector in particular, to see how they could get involved in this. I see that really there's a tremendous potential to have these arrangements on a win-win basis and take them forward for the benefit of our member countries. And again, as was highlighted and flagged by African Development Bank colleague, leveraging is key, both leveraging of resources, leveraging of knowledge, expertise and experience, and tapping into the private sector, the rich experiences of the private sector would be quite beneficial in this regard. So these are just a few remarks, preliminary reaction to this, but a lot to digest certainly, and I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity, and also want to really appreciate all the partners involved with the Islamic Development Bank in pushing forward this agenda of cooperation to support renewable energy development in our member countries. Thank you.
Thank you for this wonderful mot de la fin, as we say. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having followed us. And looking forward to seeing you on another opportunity. I hope to see you, Mr. Amjad, Mr. Daniel, and Dr. and Mr. Mansour, very rapidly, physically. So bye-bye. Thanks.